Hi, this is Microdose U, and I'm Dr. Denise. I'm a doctor of psychology. This week, I got a really interesting question, and it led me to think really about how we know this medicine, these medicines, psychedelics, specifically psilocybin and LSD, especially microdosing. How do we know that they're working? I've talked about this a lot. There's so much real world data. That's the data that's just everybody you talk to, people, articles you read, reports. And then there's the throughout time, ancient civilizations, cultures around our planet that talk about the usefulness, healing power, physiologically and psychologically of using psychedelics such as psilocybin and LSD, microdosing, some people macrodose, of course, lots of research, and yet there's hundreds of thousands of people that have reported on how useful it is. So I'm never trying to convince anyone. I myself personally have had life changing growth and healing, both physical healing. The arthritis pain in my back and my knees is just about gone, and psychological healing, a little bit of residual PTSD. My energy is great. People say to me, why do you keep microdosing if you're so much better? And that's a great question, too. The reason is because I keep seeing that I'm upgrading and I'm doing more and more highest self ways of living, doing more things. In fact, recently I joined a choir. You might have heard me reference this. It's a very large choir across the United States. And so I've never really sang in a professional capacity, certainly like high school, college, and chorus, get out of band, other requirements. And I knew I could sing. So I joined last year, I joined this choir. And of course, my voice is many decades older now, and there is something structural that changes about your voice. So as I was learning and growing and learning the music and learning the lyrics and working with my instrument, which is my voice, as I'm microdosing, I am telling myself, of course, may I be my highest best self, the confidence, the ability to relax is going to help improve singing. What I recently learned, because now I'm getting into all the neurology, there's a neurovocal technique, and the brain is very much the instrument that's helping us do things in our life, and certainly singing. So I know that singing is a breathing activity in many ways, and yet it is a brain activity. So it occurred to me to start researching this and how the brain changes, upgrades in the default mode, not just in terms of anxiety or trauma, but the structure of the brain and how it can actually help us improve in things like singing. I had no idea. This is a very curious thing. And now I'm, like I said, looking at neurovocal techniques in terms of actually working with the brain to improve the singing. This week, somebody said, how do you know it's not a placebo? So I will tell you that your intention setting is very important. Setting the intention, may I be well? May I be calm? If someone has anxiety, the intention is not remove the anxiety. It's the desired outcome. You don't want to say not. You want to say, may I be calm? May I be well? If someone has some trauma that they're trying to clear up, the intention is to feel well, to feel comfortable, and feel healthy physiologically and psychologically. Again, you wouldn't say, I don't want to be traumatized, because the brain doesn't understand not. When you say traumatized, even not traumatized, the brain just thinks traumatized. And it's important to say the desired outcome in terms of how it looks, not just the not. I will feel calm, I will feel well. It's physiologically and psychologically. So how do we know that it's not a placebo? And as I'm saying, setting the intentions is very important. However, even if you do not set intentions, we always say here at Microdose U, you can't just bite off a piece of dried mushroom, which you shouldn't do. You should always grind it, by the way. You can't just have a tea or take a capsule and just go about your business. That's not the best way to really work with these medicines. So it's very important day to day, and particularly when you take a dose of medicine, to set the intention. Now, I will tell you that sometimes I forget. And I've also worked with people here at Microdose U that they've been microdosing. They come to me here at Microdose U and they have had wild success with healing physical and psychological issues, and they've never set intentions. So they start doing that. And then, of course, exponential healing occurs. So the reason I'm telling you that is that this is how we know it's not a placebo. Because even if you do the thing we say not to do, which is take your medicine, just go about your business, even if you say this isn't going to work. Now, that's not a good way to approach the medicine, but if it's going to work, even if you say, oh, this will never work, I don't believe in this, you're adding a layer of challenge, and yet it's still going to work. This is how we know it's not a placebo. So there was a case that I wanted to specifically tell you about that it's public information. I don't share information from anyone that's here at Microdose U. This particular story, this person a few years back became an advocate due to the healing from psychedelic medicine. So this is a person, I'll give you his name, you can look him up. His name is Joseph Joe McKay. Joe McKay. He's a New York City retired firefighter. And if you look him up, you can read articles about him. You'll catch like the YouTube video. There was a brief documentary made about him. By the way, I'll just say, if you want to watch the video, it's about 17 or 18 minutes long on YouTube. You'll come across it. You'll see it. It's him the entire time. However, it's about 17 minutes long. There is some footage from 9/11. And one of the things I noticed being a New Yorker and witnessing a lot to do with 9/11, watching that first 10 minutes of 9/11 footage it's never going to feel okay to watch such horrible events. It didn't take my breath away the way it did. And so that was a little side note that I experienced, that even though I wasn't at Ground Zero, I wasn't in New York City, I'm not that far from it. Many relatives of mine, thankfully, nobody was harmed, but many were there. One of my cousins is actually a firefighter, and he's fine, lost lots of friends and coworkers. So very much a world event, as we know. So watching the footage can be a little triggering for people, especially if you were very close to those events there. So I will tell you when you watch the video that if you don't want to see any of that footage, go to about 10, 11 minutes in. You can still get the gist of Joe McKay's story. So I'll tell you quickly a little bit about Joe McKay. So he has now been retired for quite a while, but he was at Ground Zero. He was sent, as most New York City first responders and particularly firefighters. We know that we lost a lot of firefighters that day because of them going to help at Ground Zero. So he was there and he worked and did everything he could do. And so this many, many years later, he's become a strong advocate because as a result of 9/11, he worked for a while past. He had trauma, so post-traumatic stress. He had complicated grief, very complicated. He lost 4 very close people. The firefighter community lost, as we know, hundreds of people. And so he went to every funeral, very, very difficult. And he spoke about something that a lot of, in fact, my cousin even spoke about this, the survivor's guilt. That's part of the trauma, by the way. That's that trauma response. Why was I lucky enough? Why was I fortunate enough to not perish that day? Or I wasn't even there that day and heard about it later. So he had the trauma. He had the survivor's guilt. He had the grief, very extensive grief in so many ways, especially losing some very close people. You'll see him talk about in that video. One of the things that ended up happening one day out of the blue was he got this intense pain in his eye that really reached up into and he's, by the way, now, just tell you the end of the story. It was like somebody stabbed him in the eye and it was intense pain, so much so he went to the emergency room. Whatever they did for him didn't work. They scanned all that, gave him pain medication. Well, within a short time, he got diagnosed with they call it, the kind of layperson name is cluster headaches. It's also known as suicide headaches because they're so awful. And he speaks about this, that in his experience, day after day, 6 of these events per day that last for 20 minutes, an hour, on a 10 out of 10 pain scale, that it became so awful and nothing was helping that he actually briefly considered ending his life. So they talk about first responders having a higher suicide rate than the average population. That's not exactly why, but that's one of the reasons why. The physical ramifications of the work, the psychological ramifications of the work lead to more depression, more trauma, and more suicidality. So, here, back to Joe McKay, he was not even aware of how traumatized he was. He was not even aware of the complicated depths of his grief. And then he starts having these cluster headaches, so painful. He had to stop working. He couldn't, he retired from the fire department and he just wasn't getting any relief. And he stumbled upon psychedelics that they were known to potentially help. Hi, it's Dr. Denise. I just wanted to take a quick break here and come in and let you know what we really can do to be helpful for you if you really want to change your life. There's so much that we do here at Microdose U, and one-on-one coaching, one-on-one, very personalized assistance to really create the perfect healing path and understanding about the medicine and access to the medicine, knowing how to proceed and how to do the right pathway for you in terms of microdosing psilocybin, LSD. So click on the show notes. You're going to go to Microdose U. That's the word microdose and the letter U.com, and then click on coaching. All of that information is always in the show notes. And I am here for you. I absolutely know what it is like to be sitting with a lot of information and not knowing exactly what to do. Oftentimes people will tell me that just that one intensive coaching session helped them really get their path going to your highest self and really get serious about having your life exactly as you want it and having your best year ever. So just go ahead and reach out to me so we can get you all set. And he just wasn't getting any relief. And he stumbled upon psychedelics that they were known to potentially help. And there he came across the website called Cluster Busters. Actually, if you're someone with cluster headaches, check out Cluster Busters. If you have cluster headaches, you probably know about how psilocybin psychedelics has just changed the entire medical treatment. He went and he found psychedelic medicines. He started with psilocybin and he immediately had relief. The next day, he had no headaches. The next day, he had no headaches. And here was the interesting thing about Joe McKay. He took one dose. I would say it was probably not a small microdose. It was probably a larger microdose, maybe a small macrodose, if that doesn't sound like an oxymoron. And immediate healing, immediate healing. And to this day, he has no headaches. So when you get that kind of physiological, neurological response, and he didn't know that much about it. It's not like he was a believer in that. I don't think he was a disbeliever, but now he's an advocate. Now he's very active in bringing these medicines to everyone, to legalize. He's connected to the legalization advocacy teams in New York and actually in California, and I think one other state. Very much a speaker and an advocate because it saved his life. He also talks about that as a result of doing the psilocybin, he realized how much trauma he had. He didn't even know. But as a result of then getting the healing with his cluster headaches, he realized that there was a lot of complicated grief, a lot of survivor guilt. This is why he speaks about all this now, because he didn't even know that was happening. All the grief, all the trauma, all the survivor's guilt. And he also was a heavy drinker and definitely had a problem. And as a result of the microdosing psilocybin, and I believe he also added MDMA at one point, that's a synthetic psychedelic. As a result of the psychedelics, he also realized that he was drinking and he didn't even really, in the video, you'll see, he doesn't even like, oh, it helped me to stop drinking. He just didn't want to drink after microdosing psychedelics and using psychedelic healing therapies. So that's why he's such a strong advocate for it's one of the most dramatic examples of it working when it works on a brain issue. There was somebody that we worked with here at Microdose U that I always disguise the information because it's very confidential here, but this woman had had a very serious brain injury from a car accident. We're talking about severe, like able to function, but life-changing event, and lost her sense of smell as a result of that car accident and brain injury. Started psilocybin, and in addition to trauma clearing up and depression and energy, things improving overall, the sense of smell got better. Literally able to smell. That is not a wishful thinking, false placebo. What it is literally an example that the part of the brain that's connected to the sense of smell was damaged in the car accident. And as a result of micro psychedelics, it rewired and healed that part of the brain, and the sense of smell returned. These are the really intense examples of how we know that these are not just sort of one-off placebo effects. Plus, all the time, hundreds of thousands of people are always talking about how useful it is. And like I already said, even if you're like skeptical and saying this isn't going to work, it's going to work. And it's going to work better, of course, if you set intentions and say, may I feel well, whatever specific upgrades you would like in your life. It's going to work well. Even if you don't really believe it and you're skeptical, saying this will help me, this is helping me, even if you don't believe, you don't have to convince yourself, but saying those types of phrases, what it does is it helps. It helps set up the intention. The medicine knows what you want to do. You know what you want to do, and it's a great partnership for the healing physiologically and psychologically. So if you are someone who is microdosing, new to microdosing, or has been microdosing for a while and you're not sure it's working, reach out. I would love to hear from you. I love when I get the most challenging of situations when someone's been microdosing for a long time, they don't think it's working, or they're new and they don't think it's going to work. Reach out, join Patreon so you can directly message me and we can see what's going on. And I can tell you that there hasn't been one person that this hasn't worked for. So I will tell you that if you're microdosing and you're thinking, I don't know if I feel the medicine, it's really working, play with the dosage a little bit. So I'm talking about psilocybin right now, you can go up or down like 50 milligrams on the average. That's the trend. Everybody's different. With the LSD, it's much different. Tiny, tiny specks. So you cannot go up and down in the micrograms by a lot because that's a big difference. A speck is, 2 specks is a lot more than 1 speck with the LSD. So reach out if you want help with either of those or anything at all. And please, on Patreon or just directly message us here at Microdose U. It's easy to find us. Respond. There's always the contact information in the show notes. And let me know if you have questions or challenges, and I will do a video for you. I'll just directly answer you.